Hello, everyone. This is Sherry Greenhouse, Managing Partner of Serum Exchange, and I'd like to welcome you to today's Technology Showcase. Do you really need 100% call recording to understand what's happening? Presented by Evoke Analytics. So now I'd like to introduce your presenter, Bernhard Schum, Director of Professional Services for Evoke Analytics Raytheon BBN Technologies. With 20 years of experience in speech recognition and interface usability, Bernhard is Director of Professional Services. His work focuses on design and consulting services for call centers to improve visibility, workflow, and overall caller experience. He's co-authored several patents, book chapters, and published many pages and papers on speech interface usability, multimodal interaction, speech-to-speech translation, and statistical language modeling, and holds a PhD in computer science. So it is now my pleasure to turn this webcast over to Bernhard.
Thank you so much, Sherry, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for attending today's session and your interest in what we have to talk about. Well, you see it in the title. We'll talk about whether you really need 100% call recording, and I may add call analytics to understand what's happening in the calls that you handle. So we'll start with a poll to see where you stand on this question. So how many of you use 100% call recording or analytics, or you use less than 100%? Or if you don't really run a call center and the question doesn't apply to you, you may choose option F. All right, let's get started. Many of you are used to recording 100%, since that's the standard for QA purposes. Today, I will attempt to challenge that notion that you do not need 100%, especially if you are using analytics on top of your recording solution. In fact, I will make a case that you often get more powerful and more actionable insight by drilling deep into a small sample of calls. Let's look at that contrast a little bit more. When do you need samples, or what do you use samples for? Well, you study samples to see patterns and trends that then translate to the larger population and tell you what's happening in the larger population. And the prime example for that are opinion polls. Also, well, you can study a sample to optimize anything, since to optimize, you need to understand what's happening to the average caller and then decide what you change so the average is improved. And then you expect the impact on the total population. Finally, well, agent QA, you might think, oh, there I need 100%. What are you talking about? However, the reality is that most of you review about a handful of calls, maybe per month, if you're more diligent, maybe per week. 5 calls per agent. Well, in a typical call center, agents handle anywhere between 30 to more than 60 calls a day. So your 5 calls, even a week, represents just a small sample. So you really don't need to record 100% to run an effective QA program. You just need to be able to pick out a sample of calls from each agent. So a sample is good for almost everything. Now, there's a little catch within an error margin, but that catch is all frequently overblown. If you want a smaller error margin, you simply increase the sample size, and you are there. Now, well, when then do you actually need 100% recording? There's just a few use cases, I claim. One is where there is a legal or policy mandate, and the financial and healthcare industry are prime examples for that, where regulation require that you capture 100%. And second, well, if you really, there's a high value in being able to find out what happens to specific calls. Now, that plays into the mandates. Again, it's really not a separate use case, because then as a financial services company, you might have to defend yourself that your trader didn't provide inappropriate information to a particular client before they made a fatal transaction decision. Finally, even when you analyze 100%, there is error. It's not statistical error, it's systematic error. Let me give you some examples of that. Well, maybe your IVR logging engine, it may have misconfigured one prompt, so it doesn't get counted as delivering self-service. As a little oversight, and there your whole metrics can be skewed. Or more frequently, agents might be picking the wrong call reasons of the drop-off they are required to document the call. And then, well, your whole call reason distribution may be inaccurate, not because of sampling error, but because of the systematic error that agents may not pay enough attention and are pressed for time to make those right choices. Okay, well, now let's see where we stand with the poll. Okay, yeah, well, I see, well, many record 100%, well, 20%, 1 in 5. Another 1 in 5, well, really, since 50% of you don't really run a call center, that's really 40% each record and analyze 100% or equal number a sample. Okay, so it's about even. Okay, well, I made it clear where I stand. Now, next, well, let's see how you actually do 100% call recording. Evoke has traditionally not offered that, and we still haven't very advertised so. But, well, 2 years ago, a large opportunity presented to us, and then we went off and implemented a cloud-based 100% recording solution for a large call center. How do we do that? Well, just like always, if you've seen other Evoke presentations, you're familiar with that, we hook ourselves into the call as a passive listener at the network level. So then we have a handle on the call, and we can passively start recording it. That audio then gets fed into a processing pipeline that analyzes, parses the logs, and applies several signal-level detection algorithms to figure out meta information about what happened in the call. That meta information is then fed into the database. The audio gets deposited into a petabyte storage. Well, you don't need that always, but if you handle in the order of millions of calls a month, then that's the size of storage you're looking at. So really, this is a big data system, to use another hot button topic that's out there. Well, once the audio is captured, then it gets also fed through our large vocabulary recognizer to index the speech, and that index then is deposited in an Oracle Exadata, so it can be accessed fast. And that's really sort of what's going on behind the scenes. Now, as an analyst, let me just play through 2 use cases. One, the QA use case. You want to review calls from a specific agent. Well, then you access our system remotely through a web interface, and then a command is issued to, well, at first we query the database to find out which recordings belong to that agent, and then we retrieve those recordings from the storage and serve them up via the internet to your call browser. Or a second use case, you want to analyze certain topics, what has been talked about. Well, then you issue a query against our speech index in the Oracle Exadata, which delivers the transcripts back. And then if you want to listen to the calls, then in the same path, we extract that from the petabyte storage and stream it via the internet to your desktop. So this is how you can do 100% recording in the cloud. Let's look at a case study from healthcare, one of the 2 domains where there is a mandate to record 100%. This provider faced a tight timeline where an on-premise solution essentially was impossible. Therefore, they selected our cloud-based solution. How were they planning to use the analytics? Well, we are talking about millions of calls per month. We made them searchable with our large vocabulary recognizer and our speech analytics engine. They needed to know which agent handled which call for QA purposes, so then they could use the system to manage their agent workforce. They could track down individual sensitive calls by running certain queries, and they were interested in exploring certain hot topics. Well, how does that look? Well, here is an example from the actual system. Well, in many healthcare providers, these are some of the topics that are of interest. Well, the application process. And you see here some ups and downs that may correspond to enrollment periods. Many consumers are aware of the cost, especially since more and more plans require higher and higher deductibles. So cost plays a large role in these calls. Coverage, whether or not your treatment is covered and, well, what you have to pay. Or, well, more in a regulated area, you might face appeals, and then clearly here some event-triggered appeals, and then it took a long time for those to go back to a lower rate. Now we know about how often these things happen. Lots of calls about applications, not so many about costs, more about coverage. If you want to know more, how do you do that? Well, there you're looking at drilling deeper into a sample of calls. I can't do that in this example for privacy reasons, but let's look at another example. So when you actually want to understand what really is going on, you find yourself studying samples. Next example, case study, survey analysis. Here, they measured customer satisfaction based on a 5-point scale from poor to excellent. And this was delivered as an in-call survey, which means in the IVR, the caller was offered the option to opt out or opt into the survey. And then after the agent releases the call gets transferred into the survey application. And then the survey answers are captured. So what they noticed was our average scores are pretty low. And they were a lot lower than in a similar in a different market with different set of health insurances offered. So the business question was, how can we improve the score? Or why is the score low? And then how can we improve it? Well, so our professional services were tasked to look into it. The easy part was just taking a deeper look at the survey responses they had in hand. And there, no problem in analyzing 100% of those responses, which though, since not everybody responds or hangs on to make those answers, that's a sample too. It's not 100%. So what we immediately noticed is, well, there were multiple questions, not just the CSAT question. So what we noticed is all the questions were the same in almost half of the survey responses. Wow, what's going on there? And there, well, we saw two extremes represented almost all respondents. So it was either all ones or all fives, and very little anything else. So what is going on? Well, now, to get to the why, you need to drill to the actual experiences. And that's where a tool like Evoke comes in handy, where you have the end-to-end caller experiences recorded. And if it's an in-call survey, you have it recorded right along with the survey responses. So it was very easy for us to drill into those answers and figure out what's going on, what's driving all those ones and fives, all those poor and excellent scores. What we found was, well, more than half of the poor scores, they didn't even talk to an agent. So what we revealed there was a bug in setting up the survey. They had deployed new sites to handle a new traffic, and due to a bug, calls were delivered to the survey even if they abandoned in queue. Okay, well, here is an example for not sampling error but systematic error. Your whole survey responses are skewed because of a bug. Well, second here, we had our annotators listen to these calls and try to make an objective judgment. Was the poor or excellent rating justified? And we found that the poor rating was less often justified than the excellent rating. So what do we learn? Well, even in-call CSAT scores can be flawed. I must say that's the Cadillac solution in survey delivery. Why? Because it's immediately after the call, and the less time passes between the actual experience and you asking a consumer what happened, the more meaningful will your responses be. So email surveys that there's typically a 2 to 4 day delay until these consumers get through their email and then might decide to answer your survey. Or post-call surveys is not quite as bad. It might be a couple hours to a day later, but still, the more time passes, the more the callers forget, and the more their answers will reflect the general experience with your company rather than what happened on that particular call. Second, we learned how invaluable it is to be able to drill into the actual experience to get deeper insights. And here again, a tool like Evoke that captures the experience end-to-end is a great advantage. Finally, and this doesn't come out of this particular study, but we did another survey study, and they were trying to predict satisfaction in the IVR and overall. And well, what we did was we used their survey questions, but then we complemented them with some of the automated metrics that are available in Evoke that are taken on the pulse of the call, so to speak. They are based on the actual call, rather than the caller making some statements about what happened. And what we found is that our Evoke automated metrics actually were better predictors of customer satisfaction than the actual survey questions. So, and this is a nice segue into my next case study, but let's just pause here for a minute. I hope you're starting to see what the virtues are of sample analysis, how it is important to go deeper to get deeper and big insight. It's not about big data, it's about big insight. So you might have 100% survey responses or something else, but then if you only see the average is low and you can't drill into your actual experience to figure out what's going on, it's of limited use. I'm also hope you can see how, we'll illustrate that in the next case study, how complementing the automated metrics with human analysis really adds the depth, and thus you can arrive at more actionable insight. Well, with the survey analysis, I showed how it was critical to have a human listen to those calls to know whether the poor and excellent scores were justified, for example. And then finally, again, how valuable the end-to-end experience is to be able to drill into that, to get to root cause. Needless to say, sample is easier to manage. While in the big data field, a lot of engineering and the computer science and engineering fields, they have done great things so we can handle much larger data sets with relative ease. However, bottom line, smaller data sets are much easier to analyze and at lower cost. So one key takeaway here from this talk today, I hope you carry away, is you get more actionable insight at lower cost if you study samples. Now let's return to, this is leading up to the next case study. And the topic was surveys and automated metrics maybe being better than survey answers, or at least complementing them. And what we put forth there is our Evoke Caller Effort Index. Why? Why effort? Recent research has shown that effort is actually more correlated with customer loyalty than some of the common survey-based experience metrics, such as Net Promoter Score or CSAT. Optimizing effort actually leads to more satisfied customers, therefore. Second, and that's why I really love effort as a general optimization metric, lower effort also means lower cost in almost all cases. So if you minimize effort, not only do you make your customers happier, but also will you realize operational cost savings. And that's really kind of the holy grail of any call center optimization work to achieve both. So what do we have here? Well, we have 22 key performance indicators that are grouped in 5 categories. They are all extracted automatically. They represent all high-effort events on the call that we can detect with our Evoke, IVR, and speech analytics. And then we, in addition to the 22 metrics, we have one score that averages the number of high-effort events per 100 calls. Now, well, what is the advantage here? Well, because there's no human involved other than the actual caller and the automated measurement, it's objective, repeatable, economical. Second, instead of just those who choose to respond to your survey, you can measure all captured calls. And then, well, in both cases, you're looking at the sample, but this is the total sample, whereas this is only those who answered the survey, and that may be a biased sample right there. As long as you use Evoke, all these metrics are linked to the actual call experience, and I'll demonstrate that in a few minutes. And, well, I already talked about how that's important to get to root cause and thus actionable insight. So let's look here at an example of this Evoke Customer Effort Index. Here's your 22 metrics. They're grouped: network metrics, IVR metrics, mostly operations metrics, agent call handling, process-related metrics, and overall experience metrics. And then these percentages here indicate how often do these high-effort events happen per 100 calls. Like, well, in 12% of those calls, the customer heard a closed message, so they had to call back the next day. Well, more effort. Or, well, here, reprompts. In 13% of calls, customer had to try more than once to enter some information or answer a question, had to do that twice, 2 or more times, a reprompt, not moving forward on the initial prompt, and so forth. So then all these metrics here roll up to this overall score of 149, which means 149 effort increasing events per 100 calls, or 1.5 effort increasing events per call, which is, by the way, a pretty good number. This is like playing golf. You want this number to be low, since low means low effort. All right. Well, this is just, I've talked about this in other webcasts, but let's take this as an example for how you can get to actionable insight. So let's pick this multiple reprompt metric. Well, what's going on here? What can I tell our IVR team they need to do so fewer calls encounter multiple reprompts? Well, here I'm going to jump now into our actual call browser, the GUI, by which you can access the data. And here I have a dashboard that has these IVR effort metrics, abandons, and then here's our multiple reprompts. And I'm going to drill down to that, so it's going to kick me out since I'm logged out by now. So this is, oh, I wasn't logged out. Okay. This is a secure web application. So the data is all secure in our data center, and we comply with PCI. All right. So here we have the multiple reprompts, and you see how they average near 15%, recently anyway. So, well, how can we understand what we need to change? Well, we can employ some metadata, like, for example, where did the caller leave the IVR? And that's the exit point metric. This now looks like a forest, not very telling, but this is normalized incorrectly. Let's normalize it relative to all calls. Ha! And now suddenly there is 2 spikes here. So most of these multiple reprompts happen in the ID capture module, where we are attempting to identify the caller, and the payment self-service module, where, well, you can imagine we need to gather a lot of information, so there's a chance to have problems in doing that. All right. Well, so up to this point, maybe your IVR analytics solution on 100% would have gotten you to this point. But then, what exactly do you need to change about capturing these account numbers on the payment self-service? Well, to drill deeper, you need to get to the actual experiences. So I'm going to further constrain this set. Instead of 5,000 calls. I'll take out the 2 retries. So these are the calls with 3 or more reprompts, 900 calls that have experienced particular pain. And down here in our system, you have the actual calls at your fingertips. Here's the first 36, the first 25, and here's the next 25. And you can listen to some of them or a sample. Well, let's start listening. It's as easy as just clicking on this hyperlink. Boom, I'm taken to what's called the listening screen, where we have here a picture of the waveform. Over here is metadata that we inferred about the call. I'm going to call out here the more than 3 reprompts. That's why that call appeared in the chart. We can also see it completed with an agent, and it went down the payment path in the IVR. And I'll leave it at that. Up here, we have the waveform. You can see in yellow the IVR portion. Here's the Q portion, green agent portion. Interesting, it didn't end with one agent. There's another Q portion, and then another agent segment. And then it still didn't end. Another Q portion. So this customer, this caller just went through quite a journey. Aren't we interested in understanding what happened here? All right, well, down here, the middle is what we call the event list. So, well, if you have a really good IVR logging system, you might have that. So you can see what happened. Oh, I just noticed I may have muted myself. So I was just explaining the event sequence and, well, showing in the log, you can see multiple digit sequences being entered, then 2 digits, more digits. But then I challenge you, well, how would you figure out what the problem is? And I wished you good luck if you just have to look at that sequence. So instead, let's listen to the call.
Assistant, how may I help you?
Make a payment.
Pay by phone?
Yes.
Please hold while I look up your account.
All right. So far, so good. The system understood the caller wants to make a payment. So now we get into the ID capture module. Let's just listen to the prompt and then to the first response.
Okay. What account number are you calling about? That number does not seem to be a valid store account number. Please enter your 11-digit account number using the telephone keypad.
Okay. Well, that was interesting. Now, what did we learn? Well, we learned that these digits that seem to be a response to this reprompt, the invalid account number prompt, they were really the end of the first sequence of digits. So then really what happened is the caller, here you can see it in the waveform, the caller just waited a tad too long in between some digits. And then the system timed out, interrupted, and then the caller continued. So what seems like a random entry of digits, it's an interdigit timeout issue that you should consider elongating. Okay. So then, well, I'm not going to make you detect touchstone. So the caller enters, well, the caller thinks it was because the prompt interrupted me. It didn't get the last digit. So let me try that again. So the caller enters exactly the same digits again. So then let's hear what happens next.
That number does not seem to be a valid end-store account number. Please enter your 11-digit account number using the telephone keypad. I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
All right, well, what happened here? Well, we can infer the caller was stumped probably. She thought the system hadn't got all the digits. So she tried the whole same sequence again, and now the system tells her it's still not valid. Well, then she goes, what should I do? Well, here is on the fourth, not 3 times a charm, 4th times a charm. So she has another attempt, and then
your account balance is
then she finally succeeds. Okay, well, so what really happened now, you need to look closely at the actual digits pressed. That's the key to understanding root cause here. What she did was she left the first 3 digits off. Well, I bet you've had that experience that in utilities, in the bill, you might have an account number, and then there's some digits, and then they're in a box, and then there's the rest of the digits. So this IVR was expecting the second part, not the first 3 digits. Well, what can we do here? Well, there's some solutions. One is we could make the IVR more intelligent, that it knows to leave off leading digits if a caller enters more than the expected 11 digits. Or if that's too troublesome, at least we can improve the reprompt, that it doesn't say the same, please enter your 11-digit account number. Instead, if you detect that the caller enters more than 11 digits, then you might say, leave off the leading 3 digits and just enter the 11 digits that follow, something like that. So with a simple prompt change, you might make more callers successful. Or, well, the best solution would be to get the IVR people in the same room with the business people and the bill designer people, and they all agree on what the account number should look like. But, well, we all know multiple stakeholders, that can be difficult. Anyway, just by listening to the sequence here end to end, well, just in the IVR, we learned a lot about how we can reduce reprompts and ultimately how we can make the caller more successful in self-service. Since now let me fast forward here a little bit. The caller then indicates she wants to make a payment. She chooses the payment method. She wants to pay by electronic funds transfer. She's prompted for the bank routing number, and then let's see what happens there.
Press 9 numbers in the lower left-hand corner of your check. I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Please key in the 9-digit routing number using your telephone keypad. Please hold while I transfer your call.
Okay, so here she gets kicked out. Well, if you just look at logs, again, you would see she enters 2 digits, then she enters another 4 digits, and then there's another break, and then she enters another 3 digits. So you go, well, she was just confused what her account number, bank routing number is. Well, if you look closely and hear this, really what's happening is she keeps entering the routing number, and you hear her flip through the checkbook, since she cannot memorize that. So, and she probably has a phone in her hand. She doesn't even hear the reprompt. She just keeps typing the numbers. So here you have a perfectly compliant customer. Just lengthening your interdigit timeout might have made her be successful and make that payment in the IVR. Instead, she gets to an agent, but the story continues. So let's just listen here a little bit more.
Thank you for calling. Sorry, my name is Mark. Can I please have your account number?
Oh, hi. I was trying to pay automatically. I don't know why I didn't get through. Do you charge me for... Are you going to charge me now, a fee? No.
For a check by phone?
Yeah, with the customer service, no? Oh, okay, thank you.
No. Mm-hmm.
Okay, the number is 80.
Okay, here we got it. So, well, this is pretty terrible, isn't it? Well, a couple of things. First, well, even the first thing the agent does is ask for the account number. Well, this caller was fully identified. We played the balance to her. So this begs the question. Either the screen pop didn't carry through to this agent, or this agent didn't pay attention to the screen pop, or this agent was told by policies that he should verify the information by asking it again. And it's just a sad state we are in the industry, that after 20 years of customer complaining that they dislike having to provide the same information over and over again, that we are not farther along in remedying that. But here it is. And then, next we learn, this agent didn't clearly explain himself what he was doing, that he was transferring the caller, so poor agent performance, but regular QA would have caught that. What is more interesting is, why did the IVR route this call to this agent if this agent cannot handle that? The IVR had the caller fully authenticated. It knew that the caller wanted to make a payment, yet it delivers it to the wrong agent. So another opportunity to, reduce effort because she has to wait in queue and talk to a second agent and to improve the call experience. Okay, let's go back to our presentation. All right, so you see, but with the ability to get to the actual experience in a small sample of calls, you can learn a wealth of information and get a wealth of actionable insight. So by just studying this one call, we learned several ways to reduce multiple reprompts by tweaking the actual reprompts or by increasing the interdigit timeout, and potentially by making the IVR more forgiving if the caller enters more digits. We also learned that we should revisit the IVR routing rules so that we avoid a transfer like on this call. Finally, we learned that we either should look into whether the screen pops work or our policies for how agents are supposed to verify information, that they do not ask for the same account number that's already in front of them. Instead, they verify the caller by asking for a different and hopefully shorter, easier piece of information than the full account number. So almost in conclusion, the recording companies have successfully convinced most of the industry that you need to record and analyze 100%. I hope I demonstrated today that by analyzing a sample, it's almost better for almost all use cases because you can get to root cause by going deep, understanding really what's going on. That requires additional data and effort, and not always can you do the additional data on 100%, and certainly the additional effort of having a human really understand in depth what's going on is only possible in a sample. Further, I demonstrated how the end-to-end visibility as it is provided with the Evoke call analytics solution is critical to drive actionable improvement and get to root cause faster by just listening to calls and what's happening instead of puzzling over logs what they mean. So before you commit to the cost of analytics on 100%, ask yourself, would the sample suit you better? Now, I'm not totally done, but just one more minute expanding on the benefits of whole call analytics. We have looked at just 2 out of the 6 key areas where that helps, reducing transfers and maximizing IVR self-service. Also, our solution provides visibility into when the network sometimes drops calls during transfers or sometimes midstream. We provide visibility into partners, offshore centers, where you may not even have a recording solution installed or where contracts may prevent you from actually observing what agents are doing. And you can see dissatisfiers that are spread out all over the call. We actually didn't get to the final one in this call. What topped it off is that the second agent actually wanted to put the caller back into the IVR, saying she's not allowed to take a payment. And the caller just pleaded with her, please, I already tried the IVR. Can I just make the payment with you? And she was told, no, the policies disallow that. So with this, let me end on just summarizing what Evoke has to offer. We do have to offer whole call analytics, typically on a small sample, and that makes it very affordable, starting well below $100K a year, depending on how many calls you want to capture. We also offer 100% recording in the cloud. So if that's really what works better for you or is required for you, we can talk about that. And finally, I lead the professional services team, so that's close to my heart. My team are all black belts in using this data and extracting actionable insights. And typically, even if clients try to improve a system. If we come in, we typically find another 5 to up to 15% opportunity in reducing average handle time. And with that, let me just remind you, we'll put up another poll to see where you stand now, whether this webcast may have influenced your opinion. And now I'll pass it back to Sherry, and I'll be happy to take a number of questions.
Okay, thank you. And we do have the survey up, so while we're waiting, there are a couple of questions that did come in. Let's see, we have a question that someone asked for a definition of reprompt.
Yes, well, that's just anytime a caller doesn't succeed in providing the information the first time. So what's your account number? Let me see. I didn't hear you. Tell me again what your account number is. So that would be the first reprompt. And then we add those up cumulatively. So then we go on. Later it may go, how may I help you? And then the caller goes, well, I have a question about my bill. The charges increased. It used to be $90. Now it's $110. I don't figure out what's going on. And the system goes, please say billing, payments, new service, or something else. So then that prompt was another reprompt. That was the second in my fictitious example here.
Okay. Let's see, you mentioned that the Evoke Caller Effort Benchmark might replace surveys. Could you expand on that a little bit more?
Okay, good question. So I briefly mentioned a case study where we looked at a survey solution that was in place and that the customer wanted to test in parallel with some automated metrics. And the customer wanted to build a predictive model, how they could improve customer satisfaction, and so they could know where to spend their effort, where to focus. So we ran the survey along with our automated metrics and then built a predictive model. And it turned out that some of our automated metrics were better predictors of satisfaction than the survey questions that the client had chosen. So in that sense, well, automated metrics can tell a lot. Now, I'm not saying it completely replaces survey. There's still value to get verbatims and to really get the customer's view of what unfolded. However, you can economize. So you might just answer two questions. How do you feel about the company or this call overall? Just to get really that subjective experience. And then if you have any suggestion how we can do better, tell me now. So just to have an open-ended verbatim that then can be a lot richer than anything you might infer from just observing a call.
Okay. What percentage of total calls do you require to properly do analytics?
Okay. Well, so now we need to talk about error margin. First, the assumption is our sample is uniform. That's key. If we have a biased sample, then we are sunk from the get-go. Just like if our instrumentation of doing 100% log analysis isn't set up properly, then you are sunk. So assuming we have a uniform sample, then it really boils down to error margin. And there's a simple rule of thumb. So to know one digit accurately, you need 100 calls. To know two digits accurately, you need 10,000 calls. And to know 3 digits accurately, you need 1 million calls in a sample. So depends what size problem you're after. Typically, when we first engage with a customer, we can find very significant issues by just studying a few hundred calls. If we've worked with you several years, then we are after the 1 to 2% improvement. So then we would need to look at in the order of 1,000 calls.
As Evoke has been doing these type of analysis for a while, are you able to go into, when you start with a company, to help them decide what they should look for, what they, really what they should look to analyze. You're talking a little bit about how you're going to help them set this up.
Yeah, well, we are perfectly happy to consult with you to help you explore what are your key business objectives, and then decide which areas does that translate to. Should we look at self-service and optimize that? And then, by the way, this end-to-end capture is really a gold mine. Even if you have IVR analytics, you can find a lot, or you can find the simple things just by an expert review. But if you really want to maximize self-service, you need to get to the calls that reach an agent and then turn out to be routine, i.e. candidates for self-service. And then you need to be able to go back and ask the question, would we need to change in the IVR experience so that this caller is successful in the future? So it can be self-service, maybe it's transfers, maybe it's handling of calls by partners, maybe it's overall customer experience. So for each we have standard analysis, and since, in our tool we capture the whole experience, we just put the microscope on the right part to then answer the business questions that are most relevant to you.
Hey, there's a couple of questions here on bias, so let's review that again on what's the best way to avoid any sort of bias when you're doing this? There are a couple of steps that you should look at.
Good question. So, one thing that really helps is that we hook ourselves generally at the network level. So we essentially tap into the 800, the toll-free number that your carrier set up. And then your carrier diverts a small percentage of that incoming volume to us. And that really guarantees it's an unbiased sample. Now, where it gets tricky is if for some reason we can't do that, or you decide not to do that. So once we get hooked in downstream, or once you use a different tool, that is where bias can be introduced. Like you collect data from your payment center, and then in parallel you collect data from your billing center. And then, while you can try to reconstruct an unbiased picture by weighting those appropriately, that gets increasingly difficult to do. Or then worse yet, if you analyze only, survey responses or calls that went down a certain path in the IVR and reached collections, or calls that were handled in your billing center, and then you go back and wonder, how can I improve the IVR to help billing? Then you start to have a very biased view.
And there's companies here that are sending in that they pretty much use CSAT scores. But it sounds like in this presentation, you're suggesting looking at the caller effort. Should they use both? Do you feel that one is better than the other? What do you think about that?
Well, that goes back to the question about complementing versus replacing traditional survey-based metrics with efforts. So I think the ideal solution is you do both, but you dial back on the survey. You might just, as I said, ask two questions. One, overall experience, and then the second question, an open-ended, to solicit just some verbatim descriptions. And then for the rest, you rely on the automated effort metrics to tell you an objective picture of what actually is happening. So that way, you don't burden consumers with more and more surveys. We are already in survey overdrill these days. We get so many solicitations for survey, we can't possibly react to them all. So my recommendation is, if you can, just keep a very much reduced survey program and then complement it with an effort-based metric.
Okay, good. Have you found, you had shown one example of a customer effort index. Have you found that there's an average where companies are, or that number's pretty much all over the place?
Oh, there is a wide spread. So, in many of the verticals that we track, the worst performers track at or above 300, and the best performers track in the mid to low hundreds. Just like, that's why I said the company I showcased, actually 150, that's a pretty good score. So we see a pretty wide spread. And it really, if you have worked with these companies for a while, you can see where it comes from, how calls get mishandled, and how the whole company culture really lends itself to either excellence in customer service or really, I'm afraid to say, not treating your customers very well. Be so concerned about keeping low, they compete on a low price. So then that's what you get as a consumer. You get what you pay for, really, in customer service.
Do you find any differences in industry, or it could be the same industry and the numbers are still all over?
The same industry, the numbers are all over.
Okay, good. Let's see. That seems to be all the questions that we have. So what I'd like you to do is maybe take a minute and just do a wrap-up, what you would like everyone to remember from this webcast.
Okay, sure. So, I started with asking, do you need 100% recording and analytics to know what's going on and to map out where are your opportunities to improve? And I hope you take away that that's not required. In fact, in almost all cases, is it better for you to study a small sample but go deep in that sample? And to be able to go deep, a tool like Evoke is critical, that allows you to go back to the actual experience and see the customer journey end to end.
Perfect. Thank you. We're just about at the end of this webcast. So at this point, we will be closing this webcast. Thank you so much to Evoke. Bernard, very nice. Thank you for this great presentation. We have a really good idea now about looking at customer effort index and how that differs from CSAT and how we can really delve into that root cause. So thank you so much for this presentation. And at this point, we are closing this webcast. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you all for attending. Bye-bye.